4 craft room organization hacks that you need to try. Grab a sugar dispenser, spice containers, and a Lazy Susan. I placed ribbon inside the sugar container, and then I put the ribbon through the hole. I screwed the lid on, and I did this for the other sugar container too. I used smaller ribbon, wrapped it around my fingers, and placed that inside the spice jars. I put the ribbon through one of the holes in the lid and put the lid on. I placed them all on top of a Lazy Susan, and now my ribbon is super organized. I grabbed some tin cans and containers for my recycling. I cleaned them, removed the labels, and painted them with white acrylic paint. After the paint dried, I did a second coat and I let that dry again. Then I brushed on Mod Podge and put cut up tissue paper onto the container. I evenly brushed Mod Podge over top of the tissue paper and set aside to dry. For the tuna cans, I cut a strip of napkin and placed it on top of the Mod Podge and again evenly brushed a thin coat of Mod Podge on top of the napkin. For the final jar, I cut parts of the napkin out and Mod Podged them onto the jar. I let them dry completely and then placed paint markers, pens, and other craft supplies in them. The options are endless for what you could organize in these pretty recycled containers. I grabbed a gift box from the dollar store and cut down toilet paper rolls to make them the same depth. I cut as many toilet paper rolls as I could, but I'm going to collect some more and add them later. I applied hot glue to 2 sides of the toilet paper and I attached it to the one corner of the box. For the second one, I applied the hot glue directly to the toilet paper roll in the box and to the bottom edge of the box. I added toilet paper rolls and repeated these steps. Then I poked 2 holes in the top and placed a thin rope through it to hang it. I made another 2 holes along the sides near the top and placed a wood dowel through. I put ribbon on the dowel, hung the box, and placed my acrylic paint bottles in the toilet paper slots. Now my plates are completely organized and can easily be found. I grabbed a bath suction cup and a wire cube organizer. I opened the cube package and used side cutters to cut every second wire on the second row. I used the pliers to bend them forward. I did this for 3 rows, alternating between which wires I cut. Then I used zip ties and attached the suction cup containers. I attached both squares together with zip ties on either end and hung it. I placed thread and rope on the wire hangers and organized my craft supplies. Now my craft room is super organized and ready for another season of creating.
So we're going to start with 12 of these really cute little crates from Dollar Tree, and we are going to glue them together. So we're going to start with a hot glue gun, one of my favorite tools in my DIY arsenal, and I'm going to do a significant amount, but make sure you're not doing too much to the point where it's going to like spill over. All right, so we're going to do this again 3 more times, and then we'll be back for the next step. All right, so now that I have 4 of these stacks, what we're going to do is we are going to be using some wood stain, and I'm going to be applying this with a paintbrush. You can also use a sponge if that's something you feel better about, which, you know, I might switch to a sponge. We'll see how it applies. So I'm going to start at the top. I always say less is more, because you can always go back and add more if you want to darken it up a little bit. And one of the things I like about using water-based stain is you don't necessarily have to wear gloves for it, and you also don't have to worry about a chemical smell doing it outside. You also don't have to worry about a significant amount of dry time. So you'll want to make sure you're applying this with the wood grain. All right, so we're just going to continue moving around and covering every inch of these crates that are assembled together, and we're going to do the same thing on the others. Now I want to say too that like if you decide like you want to try this project but you want to go like with a different color, maybe you want to paint it instead of stain it, that is obviously something you can do. You know, I'm a big fan of kind of having like a rustic look, and I think you'll like how this turns out. So we're gonna work on this bamboo Lazy Susan. It's 14 inches in diameter. I got it on Amazon. It was relatively inexpensive. And we are going to stain this as well. So I'm gonna be using my sponge for this. I'm gonna use the same stain. I'm just going with the grain And I'm gonna give it a chance to sink in. I may do a couple coats on this, we'll see. I do want it to be a little darker than it started. All right, so here is my Lazy Susan now after, I wanna say like 4 or 5 coats of that rustic wood brown stain, but I'm actually really happy with how it turned out. It actually got a lot darker than I envisioned it being. So I'm gonna set this aside for now. We're gonna go ahead and move on to our next step. All right, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna put this into a formation where we are going to be lining them up next to one another. So first I just kind of want to illustrate what it's going to look like. So if you can see where I'm going with this, essentially we're going to be gluing these all together, and it's really important that you wait for the stain to dry before you move on to the gluing step. All right, so I'm going to start by putting some hot glue along this side, and I'm going to line it up. So we're gonna let that hold for a second. And I'm gonna essentially do the same thing with these two as well. So, all right, so we have that together. Now what we're gonna do is I'm going to put glue here and here on these two sides. So I'm gonna have to work quick. So I'm gonna give it a couple minutes to cure essentially and dry. So for this final step, you're gonna wanna decide which side you want facing up. So because of the quality of the Dollar Tree items, if there was any glue from when these were created, the stain may not show up on those parts of the little wood crates. So I've decided this is gonna be the bottom piece that you're not gonna be able to see. So we have our Lazy Susan. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to just put a ton of hot glue on the bottom here. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna flip it over and we are gonna put it on the center of our Lazy Susan. So you may have to kind of eyeball this and then let it sit for a moment. And now what you have is a really inexpensive way to store some paint and other art supplies. So we're gonna go ahead and load this up with paint and brushes and all of that so you can see essentially how it's gonna work. So we'll be back. And here's the finished product. I'm really loving this DIY Dollar Tree craft room organizer. It definitely will be really handy. I love the fact that it is able to spin and hold so much paint and my long artist brushes. So what do you think of this project? Thank you for watching Home Talk. I will see you in the next one.